Have you ever wondered what's really going on inside your own head? Well, today we're going on an expedition. We're going to explore the hidden parts of our minds using a map that was drawn up over a century ago, but one that can still tell us so much about why we do the things we do.
I mean, it's a question we all ask ourselves, right? Why did I say that? Why do I keep falling into the same old habits? Where are these feelings even coming from? It's a real mystery. And to start chipping away at it, we have to meet the very first person who tried to systematically map out this inner world of ours.
And our guide for this journey is none other than Sigmund Freud. Now look, whatever your opinion of him is, his big contribution was being the first to really try and create a comprehensive map of our psychological world. He was a true pioneer, trying to chart the huge, unseen landscape that exists inside every single one of us.
So, to get started, we first need to get a lay of the land. Freud's first big idea was that the mind isn't just one single thing. Instead, it's structured in layers. And believe it or not, most of its work happens completely out of our sight.
This is his famous iceberg metaphor, and it's perfect. You see that little tip sticking out of the water? Well, that's your conscious mind. It's everything you're aware of right this second. Just below the waterline is the preconscious. These are things you could think about if you wanted to. But the real story, the massive, hidden bulk of that iceberg, is the unconscious.
And here's what's so important about Freud's idea of the unconscious. He didn't just see it as a storage closet for old memories. No, he saw it as this active, buzzing reservoir of our deepest drives, our hidden wishes, and all our unresolved conflicts. He truly believed this hidden part of us is the main engine driving almost everything we do.
And you know what? We see little glitches from this engine all the time. Take a so-called Freudian slip. You mean to write Dear Lou, but you accidentally write Dear Love. Freud would argue that's no accident. It's a tiny crack in the surface, a moment where a hidden thought or wish from your unconscious just leaks out. It's a clue to what's really going on down below.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper into this map. If the unconscious is this huge territory, what actually lives there? Well, Freud said there are basically three competing forces or voices inside us that are always in a kind of negotiation.
Now, it's so important to remember these aren't little people in your brain. They're just a way to map out these conflicting forces. First, you've got the id. It's your raw, primal instinct. All it wants is immediate gratification. It's the part of you that says, I want it, and I want it now. Then you have the superego. That's your conscience, the rules you've learned from parents and society. It's the inner judge saying, you shouldn't do that. And stuck right in the middle is the ego. The ego's job is to be the mediator, to deal with reality, and to find a way to make the id happy without getting you into trouble. And you can see this play out every single day. Your id sees some new shiny gadget and just screams, gimme! Immediately, your superego jumps in with all the guilt, saying, that's so irresponsible, you need to save your money. Then, hopefully, your ego, the diplomat, steps in and says, okay, how about this? Let's make a plan to buy it next month if we hit our savings goal. It tries to find a compromise.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. You know that feeling of being pulled in two different directions at once? That is literally the war between your id and your superego. And that sense of relief when you finally figure out a sensible plan, that's your ego successfully doing its job. This is basically the source code for our daily struggles with things like temptation and self-discipline. So what happens when that internal battle just gets to be too much? What happens when the ego is struggling to keep the peace? Well, that brings us to the next stop on our map, the mind's alarm system and its own little special forces.
When the id is screaming for something, the superego is laying on the guilt super thick, or the outside world is just too demanding, the ego starts to feel overwhelmed. It feels threatened. And the signal that it sends out, that feeling, is anxiety.
So, to handle that anxiety, the ego brings out its defense mechanisms. And here's the key. These aren't conscious choices. They are automatic, unconscious tricks the mind plays to bend reality just a little bit, just enough to take the edge off and reduce the pain of that inner conflict.
Let's take a look at a classic one, projection. This happens when the ego just cannot deal with a certain thought or feeling about itself. So, to protect itself, it basically takes that feeling and throws it onto someone else. So, let's say deep down, I have a feeling that I'm the one being difficult at work, but my ego can't handle that thought. So, to get rid of the anxiety, I might start seeing everyone else as impossible to work with. I've turned the problem inside out to make it less about me and therefore less threatening.
But not all defenses are about tricking ourselves. Freud also talked about more mature, healthier defenses.
Sublimation might be the most interesting of all. This is where the ego takes the raw energy of a primal impulse, something like aggression, and channels it into something productive and socially acceptable.
So instead of getting into fights, that aggressive energy gets transformed. It might become the intense focus and precision of a surgeon, or the relentless drive of a competitive athlete. The raw impulse is still there, but it's been refined, sublimated into something society actually values. You could say this is the ego at its most clever.
All right, so we've looked at the layers of the mind, we've met the three voices, and we've seen the defense systems. Now, let's connect all the dots and see how this whole system comes together to create the reoccurring patterns we see in our own lives.
This right here, this is the whole chain of events. According to Freud's map, it all starts with our childhood experiences. Those experiences shape the contents of our unconscious. That unconscious material then fuels the conflicts between our id and our superego, which in turn creates anxiety. Our ego then develops its favorite go-to defense mechanisms to manage that anxiety. And over years and years, that whole process solidifies into the steady, often unconscious patterns of our adult lives.
And this is a really crucial point. Id, ego, superego, these aren't just static labels to slap onto people. They're parts of a dynamic, living system that's always in motion. And understanding the system helps us see why we have these recurring themes in our lives. You know, the type of people we're always drawn to, the way we always react to stress, our signature emotional habits.
This brings us to our final stop, and honestly, it's the most important one. Turning this map inward and using it to reflect on our own inner world. So, let's just do a quick recap. The big takeaways are a huge chunk of what drives you is hidden from you. Your personality is basically a constant negotiation between instinct, reality, and morality. Anxiety is the alarm bell that tells you that negotiation is getting tense. Your defenses are the automatic tools you use to quiet that alarm. And all of this together creates the patterns of your life.
Because the real value of a map like this isn't just knowing the theory, it's using it for a bit of self-reflection. So, the next time you find yourself procrastinating, just listen for a second. Can you hear the id that wants to have fun versus the superego that's telling you to be productive? When you get stressed out, can you spot an automatic defense kicking in? By asking these kinds of questions, we start to move from just being pushed around by our patterns to actually beginning to understand them.
And really, that's what Freud's map gives us in the end. It's not a set of perfect answers, but it's an incredibly powerful set of questions to begin that lifelong journey of figuring ourselves out. Thanks for joining the expedition.